Hey guys, welcome back. So, going to just give you guys a little information here to help you out with this diagram that you're going to be filling out on slide 32. So, if you're in this video, you've reached this part of our Pear Deck and you've gone to this C video, and it's going to now bring you to this video that we're going to talk about this diagram and how you fill this out. Now, when you go over to page 32 in your notebook, this is what your diagram is going to look like. And as you'll see, we have 4 different seasons that are being shown on this diagram. And we have our sun in the middle here because the earth revolves around the sun. And basically, what we're going to be doing to kind of figure out each of these seasons is we're really going to be looking at the tilt of the earth. And is the northern hemisphere where we are at, here we are, okay, but here's the northern hemisphere. And we want to kind of think about, is the northern hemisphere tilting toward the sun or is it tilting away from the sun? And that's going to kind of help us figure out what's going on with these seasons. So to get us started, the first thing that I'm going to have you do is I want you to take some time to try to fill this out on your own. Now, what we're wanting here for each of these different categories, okay, so there's 4 seasons. So we're going to have winter, spring, summer, and fall. Okay, so we need to figure out on this diagram, where is winter, where is spring, where is summer and fall, okay? Then the other thing that we're going to be doing here is we're going to be putting in the dates of when these seasons happen. And the sort of dividing line for these different seasons, we can look these up on the internet. You can do that to figure out where these are, or when these are, I'm sorry. And then all of our seasons are going to fall into either a solstice or an equinox. And so basically, when a solstice happens, solstices mark the shortest and longest days of the year. And the equinoxes are happening when the days are about an equal amount of time. So equinox, we can think of equal. So basically, to help get you started, okay, the dates and then the solstices and equinoxes and stuff like that, don't start by focusing on that, but really start by focusing on, in the diagram here where it's labeled number 1, well, what season is the northern hemisphere experiencing here? Well, we have the earth at this tilt, and we can see here that this northern hemisphere is tilted toward the sun. And so that means that we're going to be getting more direct sunlight happening in the northern hemisphere during this time. So that's going to produce warmer weather. So what does that mean for the season? So since the northern hemisphere is tilted toward the sun, receiving more direct sunlight, this is going to be summer. So you'll want to write here in the season, summer. Now, everything in the southern hemisphere is experiencing the opposite. So down here in the southern hemisphere, you can see because of the tilt of the earth that these places on the southern hemisphere are receiving less direct sunlight. So they're actually going to be colder during this time. And so therefore, that means that they're going to be experiencing winter. So if we're experiencing summer in the north, in the northern hemisphere, in the southern hemisphere, they're experiencing their winter. So as we go on to number 2, and the earth revolves around the sun, we have the earth is still tilted, but here the earth isn't quite as tilted toward the sun. So this is going to be fall for us. in the northern hemisphere. And then as you revolve around the sun, we get here to number 3, and we can see, oh, well now, whereas the northern hemisphere over here was tilted toward the sun, now the northern hemisphere over on this side is tilting away from the sun. So you can see that these parts of the northern hemisphere, they're receiving less direct sunlight now, and that most direct sunlight is happening in the southern hemisphere. So during this time when we're tilted away from the sun, that's going to be winter. And then that means that the southern hemisphere is going to be experiencing their summer. As we continue to revolve around the sun, we start to get to, again, where we're not quite as tilted, so things are coming a little bit more straight on. And so now we would be moving into spring here. And in the southern hemisphere, this would be fall. So I'm going to go down and show you a completed diagram with just a little bit more information. So here's a summary of what we just saw. Now in the summer, we mark summer at something called the summer solstice. Okay, Miss Johnson can't talk today. So summer is marked on the summer solstice, and the summer solstice is going to be the longest day of the year, and that's when we mark summer. This happens between June 20th and June 22nd. These numbers shift a little bit here and there every year. You know, kind of like how we have Thanksgiving, it's always on a Thursday, but some years the dates are going to be a little bit different on that. So the summer solstice is marking summer, and that is the longest day. As we move around the sun into fall, in September, between the 22nd and the 24th, we have something called the fall equinox. The fall equinox is a period where the day and night is about the same amount of time, meaning that there's about the same number of daylight hours as moonlight hours in our day. And so we call this the fall equinox because the daytime and the nighttime, those hours are relatively equal. And so that's the marking of fall. As we move into winter, we have what we call the winter solstice that happens between January 20th and 23rd. And the winter solstice, can you guess how the length of the day? The winter solstice is the shortest day of the year. And so that's when we're going to have the fewest number of daylight hours and the most number of dark hours. And so that is marking winter. Then as we continue our rotation, or not our rotation, our revolution, as we continue our revolution around the sun, now we move into spring and we start to see the days becoming longer. And at the spring equinox, which is around March 19 through 21, somewhere in there, we have our spring equinox where the day and nighttime is about equal again. So there's like this whole pattern that you'll notice throughout the year. For instance, in summer, in June, with that summer solstice, I cannot say that word, solstice, say that 3 times fast. With the summer solstice, that is our longest day of the year. And we notice in the summer that it stays light out for a lot longer. That's because we're tilted toward the sun. We have longer hours of daylight. As we move into fall, after the summer solstice, that's the longest day of the year. And so after the summer solstice, our days start to become a little bit shorter, a little bit shorter. At the fall equinox, our daylight and nighttime hours are about the same. And then as we move into winter, the days are becoming shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter until we get to the winter solstice, which is the shortest day of the year in terms of daylight hours. And then we start to, after the winter solstice, we start to have our days begin to increase again in length as we move into spring. And then again at the spring equinox, we are back to roughly equal number of daylight and nighttime hours. And then from there, throughout the spring, our days start to grow longer and longer and longer until we're back again at the summer solstice. And then there's the longest day of the year again. So these are cyclical patterns that happen over and over again. Humans have been fascinated by this for thousands and thousands of years. And so that's just a little introduction to why we have the seasons, the reason for the seasons. And so now, what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to go in to this last slide, and there is an Edpuzzle where you're going to have some really nice visuals of what's going on with the seasons and their relationship to the tilt of the earth. There are some questions in a Google Doc for you guys in Schoology. So go on in over to Schoology and finish that up. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you learned something today.